Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Martin. It's a special honor and pleasure to be here to have this discussion with you. I think it is also important that academic institutions take the time to think about their missions and how they are organized. And particularly proud to talk in this audience in this famous and old university, which certainly has lessons to give us to know how the universities can go through the centuries and evolve. So I have decided to take this opportunity to present my personal reflections about the evolution and the challenges that the academic world at large, including universities, research institutes, must face nowadays. I should emphasize that professionally, I am not an expert in the organization of academic institutions. There are the colleagues who are experts in that. Nevertheless, I think that it is important that all of us who have had experience both in research and in leading institution of higher education take the time to present also their personal thoughts about that. So I have decided to propose you talk in two parts, and I want to focus the first part on really starting with the missions of the universities, starting with the expectations that one has about universities, and maybe also some more or less, maybe less explicit hidden duties of the universities and how they evolve nowadays. I will focus first on the universities for reasons which will become clear later. Let me first start maybe by listing the bishops, and I will start in a very traditional way when she's looking at history. And of course, historically, as we all know, the first mission of university is teaching. It is a transfer of knowledge. Universities have been dedicated to that single mission for centuries, though if we can't forget about that. It is still perceived as the primary mission often of universities. And I know some systems, I should say that myself, my experience is based on higher education, of course, in the French system, but also in the US and in Italy. And I know some systems where sometimes journalists or even government bodies continue to compare the financing of various universities by giving a budget per student, which I think is an indication that they do not pay attention to other missions and expectations that one has of universities. I don't say that it is it's an indicator that has its value, of course, but there are many other missions that universities can fulfill and what should also consider. So for many centuries, universities were dedicated to teaching. There were several models of that, models in which professors were paid by the institution, model like the Bologna model in which the students would hire the professor, pay them, different systems. And still now there are different systems that pay. The second official mission of universities recognized everywhere is research. It was not present initially. In the first centuries of the existence of universities, probably research was certainly done, but often it was done in hidden. I can think of alchemy, for instance, or it was done also in auxiliary structures like academia, which have played a major role for many, many, many years. Probably the main turn, as everybody knows, the main turn about insertion of research into university is around 200 years ago, where there started to be the appearance of the Humboldtian model. Humboldtian model where the teaching and research are grouped inside together inside the university with a system of professors who get tenure, and where the research objectives and research topics are determined freely by the researchers themselves, by the professors themselves. So this is a model which is still very much present, still very, I think, very solid and appealing. But of course, one should keep in mind that simultaneously to that, or soon after this development, this first development of the Humboldtian model, there was development of more professional training and professional schools which started to develop. And this is also, of course, one of the missions of higher education. So there is balance of various structures in which are really Humboldtian in the sense also of the university. The autonomy of the university is guaranteed by the government in case picking up its topic freely and training really mostly through basic research, and some more professional training schools, which are also very important. Engineering schools, technical schools, professional schools. There were evolutions. There were many evolutions on that. For instance, the École Normale Supérieure, which I was director of in Paris for 10 years, was created basically during the French Revolution and then sold for critical reasons and created again by Napoleon. It was a professional school. It was a school for training teachers. Actually, the initial project of the revolution was training teachers who would be able to build inside France other schools for training teachers. So it was a two-level pyramid. It was a very ambitious project. And gradually, of course, it turned into something that nowadays we call a university, that is main research center and Humboldtian style. This was, by the way, the kind of many normal schools that existed both in Europe but also in the United States, which were turned into universities, sometimes officially, sometimes keeping the name. I'm thinking, for instance, of UCLA. Few people remember that the longest school before being called is the third pillar, kind of universally recognized of the missions of universities, is really innovation. That's more recent. It is also sometimes more debated. The question here is to favor the interface with the economic world, with the companies, the creation of business, creation of wealth from research results. Philosophically, one would say that it starts to depart from the initial objective of university, which has no relation with the economic world, which is a creation of knowledge for itself, which is, of course, extremely valuable. But gradually, and in the last few decades, it has become a very important subject, which is how to making sure that the results from research can be transferred to the society at large and can lead to development. So here we have a question of the development of applied research and innovation within the labs. How are the students involved? How are the academics involved? These three pillars that I started with three missions, I will come back to them later on, but I want him to start in this list. But before going back to some organizational details, I want to go on with the missions and start stating some aspects of the universities, which I will call rather maybe expectations, in the sense that maybe often they are not officially listed as some of the missions, official missions of the university. The first one is outreach. Outreach is a very important aspect, is a diffusion of scientific ideas towards large audience. Scientific ideas, scientific results. It means capacity of organizing conferences, the capacity of having publications which are also able to go beyond those academic worlds, but to open up to a large public. The capacity of organizing events, and probably nowadays the capacity of reaching out through social media, through the press, etc., etc. I think it is a very important aspect of what the universities and also actually academies should do, in the sense that having in mind the ideas of the Enlightenment, it is of crucial importance that the developing science and progress in science is carried towards a larger and larger audience. This is sort of a fundamental philosophical importance, but it is also more and more used and made necessary as a justification for the value of the university. Universities, they need to get public support, they need to get funding, they need to be able to attract new students. And so this aspect of outreach has impacted all these directions. Another expectation, which is a little mentioned, is the insertion in a territory. Universities nowadays contribute to the economic and cultural wealth of a territory. Sometimes, in many places that I know, they are one of the major employers, an employer with high quality jobs, and they also have a very big impact on the whole life, culture, and economic life of a territory through the student life, through all the events which are organized, through maybe, in some cases, a network of companies which are inserted around the university campus, and which are in kind of symbiosis with the research developed at the university. Think of Silicon Valley for this. It's an obvious one, but many territories. Probably one could say that there is no major city without a big university, which has a big impact on the whole life of the territory. It is also true of infrastructures. Universities are places where you have lecture halls, when you have also infrastructure for sports, for all kind of infrastructure, which typically can be, I would say, should be shared with the city, the region in which they are inserted. A third point, which is even less often mentioned, and maybe not as well universally accepted, is not accepted in all its dimension, is that the university can be, and in my opinion should be, a place of public debate. We have this very precious heritage from the previous centuries, which is the heritage of the debate, of the capacity of organizing discussions within universities. It's part of the elaboration of the knowledge, go through possibility of contradiction and possibility of people raising their heads, saying, I do not agree. But it also means that this debate has its rules. It must be organized in such a way that various points of view can be presented. And I think that the university is really a place in which this public debate must take place in all its dimensions, and including political debate. There we start to go into a dimension which is always delicate, and delicate also for presidents, rectors of universities, because we all know that when there are political debates organized within the universities, it can be a source of, let's say, disorder of all kinds. Still, I think that having been again at the end of a small university, but with a very strong tradition of critical debate, I think I always made a point of letting the debate go, but always through the discussion with the organizers of the debate, the fact that there should be always, in a well-organized way, the possibility of people who still agree should be able to present their point of view. Maybe one of the final points of the expectation that one would have, is it an expectation or is it a moral duty? I think both. Is the university as a source of reference on knowledge. And a source of reference, we should be able to serve as a guidance. Here, we start to hit a point which is a rather subtle one in some sense, which is the notion of scientific truth. As we all know, scientific truth exists, but it cannot be absolute. And so this is a message that is hard to convey nowadays in the era of social networks where everything should be phrased in one sentence and black or white. It's very sharp, very getting to people through their emotions more than through their brain and reflections. It is hard to still keep this idea that there is in science, in general, science at large, all kinds of sciences and humanities, that we have the capacity to assert that there are some topics which are well established, you can say. It does not mean that they cannot be challenged and reconsidered. That is part of the dynamical activity of science. But they are here and they are present. And I think it is becoming more and more important for universities to be able to convey this message. And actually, not only universities, academies will be also in that direction. In the sense that we are facing a moment in which there is less and less, it's becoming less and less clear to a wide public on what are scientific truths, even obvious ones. I mean, I don't recall you the statistics of people saying that the Earth is flat. It's absolutely incredible, the number of people think that. The fraction of people who believe that global warming is not of anthropogenic origin, it was anomalously very high. And so it means that we collectively, the university, the academic institutions, we have not been able to face this challenge, which is to appear as a pillar where we can give an idea of scientific concept. This is a very, very big problem. I want to quote a quote of Hannah Arendt in her works on the origins of totalitarianism. When everyone lies to you, the result is not that you believe the lies, but that no one believes anything anymore. A people who can no longer believe anything cannot form an opinion. They are deprived not only of their ability to act, but also of their ability to think and judge. And with such a people, you can do what you want. I think we have to keep that message of Hannah Arendt in mind. There are several problems faced by university. You can pin this to the next. The university should manage to be heard. Their message should be listened to. And we go back to the previous discussion about the presence in the media, the capacity to talk to the people, the capacity of mobilizing scholars so that they could talk to the people. It's often difficult. In science. We have a lot of disciplines in science in which there is a lot of technicity and many colleagues would fear to go to the public in the fear to oversimplify. The second problem is that the information given by the scholars should be trustful. And we have had, unfortunately, several cases, even in recent time, of some colleagues who have gone away from, let's say, the scientific rigor and presented some of their own feelings about science to the public in a way which is completely opposite to the established scientific truth. And they insisted on the fact that science being truth. I know it is relative, I know it's evolving in time, but at a given moment, it exists. Let me give you two examples which took place in France. In France, there was, during the epidemics of the COVID, there was a professor of epidemiology, medicine, Professor Rao in Marseille, who thought and believed that he had found a treatment of COVID through hydroxychloroquine. This has had a terrible impact. I mean, Professor Rao was a famous professor with all kind of prizes as the leader and director of an institute in Marseille. Yet, his opinion that hydroxychloroquine could be beneficial was a prejudice, which was not confirmed by scientific evidence. And I remember that vividly because there was big debates in France about that, and he published a paper saying this is evidence for hydroxychloroquine. And I remember that I went myself as a simple mathematical physicist. Far from that, I went to read this paper. And even at that time, I was still on Twitter, no longer. But I remember tweeting about that paper saying, I don't know anything about the COVID and this microscopic disease. The only thing that I know is that the data which is presented in this paper does not present any evidence in favor of this. It was just an answer from a statistician. And I think it's something which is very important. When you have someone with professor who starts to go into a wrong direction, you need to have the other voice. And that is the organization that you can find in science. So the second, of course, it is, and then you see that one individual like that, with such a position, creates a big harm to the whole society, because this helps to destroy the trust in science. The times are really tough for the trust in science. It's also a very long-lasting evolution. I mean, if I borrow from my friend, the historian François Hartog, who has been looking at the evolution of the perception of time as for the early ages, and basically until 18th century, history was turned towards the past. We are studying the past and trying to get lessons from this. And then you start to have the notion of progress, and scientific progress was perhaps 18th, 19th century, 20th century. We are turned to the future. We are believing in progress. And now, to a large extent, one of the challenges that we face is that people do not believe anymore in progress. And this creates a distrust with respect to the ideas developed in the universities. We are in the era of what Hartog has a phrase as present, just oriented toward ourselves, to the present. And that's all this question of trust are very important, and they should be, we must take them very seriously. Let me give you a quote that probably some of you have read. That's a a quote from Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, in a 2021 speech that he was not Vice President, it was a speech again. It was entitled, "The Universities Are the Enemy." And let me quote something from this speech. He said, "The universities, which control the knowledge of our society, which control what we call truth and what we call falsify, which provide research that gives credibility to some of the most ridiculous ideas that exist in our society." That is how he describes the universities, and that is on that basis that he speaks on the enemy. So this is a typical speech against enlightenment, and one could discard it as stupid. It is stupid, but one must take it very seriously nevertheless. And universities are usually not well equipped to fight in the political arena. As I said just before, what matters in the political arena is not the facts, it's not the scientific truth. It is how you appeal to the emotional world. And universities, academies, I think that we have to develop a specific thinking about that, which is how to reconcile what is our basic duty, which is establishment of new science and capability to transfer it, and be able simultaneously to fight such positions. And I think it's something very important. Last expectation, maybe one should expect from academic institutions that they are able of self-reflexive critical thinking, meaning being able to turn towards itself, try to see what we are doing, what is our capacity to adapt to the evolution of the society, both on background knowledge and knowledge. I think that this is important, and actually today's session is an example of this capacity. So this is the first part of my talk. The second part, I will do it short. I will keep also some of the ideas of the second part for the debate of afternoon. But let me mention a few items about going back to the consequences. They are just listed tensions and challenges. And now we should really try to start from that and see what we can deduce from the point of view of the evolution and the organization of higher education and research. I start with teaching. My opinion, the intertwining of research and teaching in the Humboldtian style is still a very valid approach. I think it is actually crucial. In some systems that I know, for instance, if I look at the system of French preparatory schools to Grandes Écoles, the undergrad training is done by professional teachers who are not researchers. They are often very good, very well trained. They get a good degree of university. They are nearly always doctors. But then they start to change in these undergrad classes, and they will not be in contact with the research for the next 3 or 4 decades with everyone. I think that this is a mistake. It has some advantages on the one hand, that you have very well dedicated teachers who are able really to have propose very appealing courses, well framed, everything is perfect. But I think that it is important. Certainly it is important to have teachers who are able to give this kind of courses at the undergrad level. But you also need to have researchers who are able to provide courses even at the undergrad level, which are facing some of the ideas that are really up to date in research. And this is something which I consider most important. If I maybe a small personal point of view, when I moved to Milano to Bocconi University 3 years ago, it was because Bocconi University, which is basically a business school and that school of economics, very famous for those of you who know it. But 4 or 5 years ago, this university decided to open a department of computing sciences, which is basically artificial intelligence, let's say, to put it in a frame that everybody understands. And so it was a very big challenge for such a university. She did not have really purely scientific department, create a department from scratch. And they hired 5 professors around the world, including me, and asked us to develop a curriculum starting from undergrad, completely from zero. And so they developed license, master, doctorate degrees, and decide what would be the curriculum, what would be the training, how we recruit the students, what do we teach, etc. I found it very interesting, and that's why I moved to that university. I think that before we are able to provide in the French system of preparatory school to what we call a curriculum which will be directed towards AI, it will take decades, and for good reasons. And all these extremely smart professors that I was thinking before, they have been trained much before all that. And so we need to have a new generation of teachers. It will take forever. So there I think that we have this question of teaching. We have a big question, which is a challenge of interdisciplinarity in teaching. This is something that I will come back maybe later on in the debate, and we have the question of the evolution of teaching methods. And I want to strike, even if it's a bit a moment of, you might think that it is a moment of a fashion topic, still I think that it is important. The way that AI is coming into the game is something that we have to think much about, not only think, but use. My personal point of view is that AI should not be banned from the university. It should be present in there, but what we need to do is to help the student to use it and develop critical mind. I'm using AI for some professional tools, for finding bibliography, for writing codes or things like that. But I'm always extremely cautious about the results, because I know that in the sequence of words which has no profound meaning, so is it good or not? I have to be critical. And I think that's one of the students turning to what youngest part of the audience. Use the large language, but be critical. Be able to say, this is bad point. This is suspicious. Ask him another prompt. Where did you get? Can you give me the reference, etc.? And so many times it happened to be, can you tell me this passage from point 3 to point 4? It's interesting. Can you give me some detail? Then I said, no. And then at some point he says, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, etc. It always say I'm sorry in the large language you want to. But you have to be able to get them the point where they say, I'm sorry, I made it out. And that's something very important. And if you do that, you get a personal trainer, you get a coach. And I see that we, like universities, that have to think in that. It's something that we have to face. All of them, they are using it. I think not asked to raise their hand, but I'm sure they are. I think they are getting late, and they have still its pages of notes to move forward. But I need to keep something for the debate. So the thing that maybe the last point that you want to mention during this speech now is the question of research. The question of research, where should it be done? In what conditions? as I said, I am a great fan of the combustion model in which research and teaching are not in place. Does it mean that the research institutes are useless? No, I think research institutes can be useful, but they should be carefully framed to some specific objective. Some of the specific objectives which are obvious are knowledge drivers. I mean, maybe probably the CERN is one of the obvious case project, a big scientific project where you need to have forces which go much beyond the forces of any university. You need to have a group of scholars who are into to make an impact. There are some very practical objectives in which you also need to have sizable groups of researchers, and this can be research structures. But apart from that, I think that one should really try to do best to keep the research within the universities. And then, of course, we are facing the many challenges of the organization of research in a university. One of them is interdisciplinarity. Again, picking up from my experience at École Normale, I always thought that one of my main duties as head of that institution was to try to understand what were directions of development of science, what were directions of research, which probably are specifically for the ones which are not at the heart of the disciplines, which deserve to be boosted, to have some new space, to have some new maybe budget so that they can be developed. And I always found it one of the most interesting aspects actually of the university. When I was at École Normale, we created a lab on digital humanities, a lab on quantitative biology, a lab on data science and AI, and a lab on medicine and humanities, also with training curriculum. And I think that this is very important. At the heart of the discipline, if someone thinks if in the department of mathematics there is a 2 or 3 young researchers which probably are able to make some progress on the Riemann conjecture, the mathematicians will notice it and they will do it by themselves. But at some point, if there is a need to train new students in mathematics so that they get into quantitative biology, that is the role of the universities. Typically, it's not the mathematicians themselves which will do it, but one has to get to them and say, look, that is interesting. Why not? And I think this is something which is extremely important. And it goes beyond science, humanities. I think it's also extremely important to keep lively a research atmosphere in which there are exchanges between human and science. That's something that I also try to do, organizing specific seminars in which there would be the various communities which talk to each other. So there are many other aspects that they could give about the research funding, research evaluation is very important aspect, but maybe this would go more into sort of slightly more technical aspects, and I will keep that for this afternoon discussion. Let me try to conclude rapidly. I wanted to stress with you the fact that academic institutions are facing a number of challenges, which is increasing steadily, which has been increasing steadily, and with a very fast acceleration in the last few years, as all of the scientific fields actually have been accelerated. Probably, I'm not at all an expert on the university in the Middle Age, but the life of the university was never quiet. There was always challenges. There was always debates from the society, debates with the church, of course. But I think that now we are facing this acceleration, and And the big challenge that is in front of us, created by all these aspects that I mentioned before, interaction with the society, aggression against the university by major political leaders, all this is probably and of course the diminished faith into scientific progress and the diminished trust for the universities, which is probably the main challenge, then how to reconstruct, how to rebuild the trust of all of the public towards their universities. On top of that, there are a lot of organizational challenges, which appear as in detail with respect to these main kind of philosophical ones. But I think they are very important. The financing of the university, the contribution on the students or not, free access for students whose family cannot afford the tuition fees. All these are very important topics. This being said, I think that by encouraging the end of this introductory presentation, I want to really thank all of you for your attention, and I want to thank Herbert for being in it a lot. Speaking for.